I was 6 years old the first time I understood what being unwanted truly meant. It wasn't a slap, a shout, or even an insult. It was silence. It was the way my parents looked through me as though I were something they had been forced to tolerate rather than a child they had chosen to love. Our house was massive, with tall windows that let in golden sunlight, chandeliers that shimmered like frozen stars, and rooms that seemed to stretch forever. It smelled of lavender and fresh bread, the kind of home where laughter should live. And it did, just not for me. My older brother, Marcus, had a room fit for royalty. A king-sized bed, shelves lined with trophies he barely cared about, and a TV so large I once thought it was a movie screen. My sister, Clara, had walls painted in soft pink with a vanity table overflowing with makeup, stuffed animals, and jewelry that glistened under the warm glow of her bedside lamp. And me? I lived in the basement. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a temporary arrangement. It was deliberate. When I first saw the room, I thought there had been a mistake. The walls were bare, rough cement that held the cold no matter how many blankets I piled on at night. The air was thick with the scent of dust and forgotten things. There was one small window, so high up that all I could see was a sliver of the outside world, a reminder that life existed somewhere beyond the darkness I had been given. I had no desk, no decorations, no warmth. Just a thin mattress on the floor, a rickety dresser with 3 drawers, one of which was missing a handle, and a single bulb that flickered like it was gasping for life. At first, I had the audacity to ask why. Why can't I have a room upstairs? I had asked timidly, my small hands gripping the edge of my mother's silk dress as she adjusted the pearls around her neck. She barely glanced at me. "You should be grateful you have a room at all," she said. Grateful. That was the word they used to remind me I had no right to want more. I tried asking my father once, hoping he would be different. I caught him in his study, a place that smelled of leather and expensive whiskey, where the walls were lined with books he never read. He looked up from his newspaper, barely meeting my eyes. "This house has order," he said. "Your brother and sister have earned their space. You should focus on proving your worth instead of whining." Earn their space? How had they earned it? By existing? By being firstborn? By simply being loved? I never got an answer. Instead, I learned to accept. Acceptance meant eating dinner in silence while my siblings talked about their new clothes, their weekend plans, the gifts they got just because. It meant watching my brother shove a brand new tablet into his drawer, untouched, while I was handed a second-hand notebook with scribbled pages from some forgotten school year. Acceptance meant pretending I didn't hear them call me the basement kid. The first time I heard Marcus say it, he was talking to Clara in the hallway outside my door. "He should be used to it by now," he laughed. "He's the basement kid." Clara giggled. "It suits him. Like a rat in a hole." I lay on my mattress that night, staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to the hum of the washing machine my mother had placed just outside my door, because where else would she put it? The constant churn of clothes tumbling against the drum became my lullaby. By the time I turned 10, I stopped asking for anything. I stopped trying to sit next to them on the couch during movie nights. I stopped hoping for a seat at the table during Christmas dinners. I stopped expecting gifts on my birthday. The last one I ever got was when I was 7, an old puzzle with missing pieces. "Your siblings have more important things to celebrate," my mother had said when I found no present waiting for me the following year. "You'll understand when you're older." I understood plenty already. I understood that love in my house was conditional, that I was an afterthought, that no matter what I did, I would never be enough. The basement was proof of that. When I got sick, I was left to recover in that cold, dark space, the only warmth coming from my own body heat. When I cried, no one came. When the power flickered and left me in total darkness, I learned to sit still and wait it out. I became invisible, but I also became something else. I became hungry. Not for their affection. I had given up on that a long time ago. No, I became hungry for something they didn't think I was capable of, power. I realized something important in those years alone, staring at the sliver of sky from my tiny basement window. They thought they had buried me, but I was only planting my roots. And one day, I would rise so high above them that they wouldn't be able to ignore me anymore. They would have to look up. When silence becomes strategy. By the time I reached my teenage years, I had perfected the art of being invisible. I had learned how to shrink myself down to a shadow, how to exist without expectation. If they didn't see me, they couldn't hurt me. If I didn't ask, I wouldn't be disappointed. But silence didn't mean surrender. I had stopped fighting for a place in the family, but I had started fighting for something else, freedom. Not the kind that came with open doors or kind words. No, I wanted the kind of freedom that meant they would never have control over me again. And if I wanted that, I had to build it for myself, brick by brick, without them ever noticing. So I became careful, calculated. My parents thought I was docile, obedient, unremarkable. That was fine. They could believe whatever they wanted. It made it easier for me to work in the background, undisturbed. I started waking up earlier than everyone else, slipping into the kitchen before my mother could sigh in annoyance at the sight of me. I made myself breakfast with whatever scraps were left, quickly eating before the house came alive with the sound of my siblings demanding their perfectly cooked meals. I stayed out of their way. I studied late at night when no one was around to laugh at me. I worked small jobs, cleaning neighbors' yards, stacking books at the library, running errands for the elderly, pocketing whatever cash I could. Every dollar mattered. Every cent was a step away from them. But I never let them see. I let Marcus believe I was stupid. I let Clara think I was beneath her. I let my parents believe I had accepted my place in their perfect, golden world. Because the truth was simple. I was playing the long game. The shift. The real change happened when I was 15. I had always been a good student, not that anyone cared. My parents never asked about my grades. They didn't attend school meetings. They never praised me for my work. But that year, something different happened. A teacher, Mr. Reynolds, noticed me. Not in the way my parents did, with indifference, or the way my siblings did, with mockery. No, he really saw me. "You've got something," he told me one afternoon after class, holding up my test paper. A perfect score, marked with red ink. "You ever think about what you want to do after school?" I stared at him. No one had ever asked me that before. Because my parents had already decided what I wasn't going to do be important. I hesitated before answering. "I want to leave." It wasn't the usual response. Most kids talked about careers, college, dreams of making a name for themselves. But that wasn't what I cared about, not yet. I just wanted out. Mr. Reynolds studied me for a moment before nodding. "Then you need a plan." And for the first time, someone wasn't telling me to be grateful for what I had. He was telling me to take what I deserved. That day, something clicked inside me. I had always been patient, biding my time, working in silence. But now, I had direction. A strategy. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing. The weight of their indifference. While I was shaping my future in secret, my siblings were wasting theirs in plain sight. Marcus barely scraped through school, his arrogance making him lazy. He thought he was untouchable, that money would always be there to clean up his messes. Clara, spoiled and careless, spent her days shopping and her nights sneaking out to parties. She thought beauty was enough to carry her through life. And my parents? They only cared about appearances. About making sure the world saw them as the perfect family. It didn't matter that Marcus had crashed 2 cars. It didn't matter that Clara had failed half her classes. But if I so much as breathed too loudly at the dinner table, my mother's glare could cut me in half. Because I was the stain on their image. The child they shoved into the shadows, hoping I'd disappear completely. I let them believe they were right. I let them think they had won. But in reality, I was watching them lose. Because while they were squandering their chances, I was creating mine. Breaking the chains. The final push came when I turned 16. It was supposed to be a big deal in our house. Sweet 16, grand parties, expensive gifts. Clara had gotten a diamond necklace for hers. Marcus had been handed the keys to a brand new car. And me? Nothing. No cake. No gift. Not even a passing mention. I sat alone in the basement that night, staring at the ceiling, feeling the familiar weight of nothingness. But instead of sadness, I felt something different. Relief. Because in that moment, I realized that their neglect was my freedom. They didn't care about me, which meant they wouldn't see me coming. The escape plan. By 17, I had a plan. A real one. I had saved up enough money to leave. Not a lot, but enough to start. I had applied for scholarships without telling anyone. I had researched jobs, housing, anything that would get me as far away as possible. And the best part? They still didn't see me. I was a ghost in my own home, a presence so ignored that when the day came for me to finally walk away, they wouldn't even realize I was gone. And I liked it that way, because when they did notice, it would already be too late. Leaving wasn't an act of defiance. It wasn't a grand rebellion or a dramatic exit. It was quiet, precise, and calculated, just like everything I had done up until that point. By the time I turned 18, I had nothing left to wait for. There was no birthday party, no farewell dinner, no last-minute hug, or words of encouragement. My parents didn't look up when I entered a room. My siblings barely acknowledged my existence. It was perfect. I had spent years making myself invisible in their world, but now I was about to disappear for real. The last morning in that house, I woke up before sunrise, the same way I had done every day for as long as I could remember. The air in the basement was damp, the single bulb overhead casting a dim, sickly light over the concrete walls. I had packed everything I owned the night before, not that it took long. A duffel bag. That was it. 18 years of existence, and I could fit my entire life into one bag. I should have been bitter, maybe even angry, but all I felt was calm. I was leaving, and nothing could stop me. I moved through the house silently, my footsteps barely making a sound on the cold tile floors. The mansion that had once felt like a prison now felt like nothing at all. I passed Marcus's room first. The door was slightly open, revealing him sprawled across his bed, snoring loudly. Expensive sneakers lay scattered on the floor, his desk covered in half-finished college applications he would never submit. Next was Clara's room. Pink curtains, makeup palettes, designer handbags tossed carelessly on the floor. She had been out late the night before, no doubt partying, drinking, doing things she never had to suffer consequences for. They were sleeping soundly, blissfully unaware that their world was shifting. I made my way to my parents' bedroom door, stood outside it for a moment, and then I walked away. No note. No goodbye. Just silence. The walk to freedom. I didn't have a car. My parents never considered me worthy of one. So I walked. The air was crisp, the sky still dark, the roads empty. Each step felt surreal, like I was walking out of a life that never truly belonged to me. I had no regrets. I didn't turn back. Not once. There was nothing left for me in that house. No warmth, no love, no reason to stay. I had given them every chance to see me, to acknowledge me, to give me even a fraction of what they had given my siblings. They had made their choice. And now, I was making mine. The first taste of independence. I took a bus to the city. It wasn't far, but it felt like an entirely different world. The moment I stepped off, I inhaled deeply, letting the rush of car horns and bustling crowds settle into my bones. I was free. I had enough money to rent a tiny room, nothing fancy, barely enough space for a bed and a desk. But it was mine. For the first time in my life, no one could tell me where to sleep, what to do, or remind me to be grateful for their scraps. That night, I lay on my new bed, staring at the ceiling, realizing something that should have been obvious. I was alone. Completely, utterly alone. And I wasn't afraid. Building from nothing. The first few months were tough. I worked long hours, morning shifts at a cafe, night shifts cleaning offices. I barely slept. My feet ached. My body was exhausted. But I never complained. Because for the first time, every dollar I earned was mine. No one could take it from me. No one could tell me I didn't deserve it. I enrolled in community college, juggling work and classes with a kind of determination I had never felt before. While my siblings wasted their lives on luxury and excess, I was carving a future out of nothing. And the best part? They still didn't know. I wasn't on their minds. Not a single call. Not a single message. I had truly disappeared from their world. And I liked it that way. The moment they noticed. It took almost a year before they realized I was gone. One day, out of the blue, I got a call from my mother. I stared at the screen, surprised to see her name. For a second, I debated answering. Curiosity won. Hello. There was silence on the other end before she spoke. Where are you? That was it. No, how have you been? No, are you okay? Just those two words, laced with something that almost sounded like confusion. I almost laughed. They had barely noticed me when I was under their roof. Why would they care now? I'm busy, I said flatly. Busy? She scoffed. With what? With my life. A sharp breath. As if she hadn't expected that answer. There was an awkward pause before she sighed. Your father wants to know if you're coming home. I couldn't stop the smirk that spread across my face. Home. The basement. The neglect. The silence. No, I said simply. And then I hung up. I never picked up another call from them again. A new beginning. Years passed. I worked. I studied. I built myself into something they could never ignore. I started my own business, a tech startup that took off faster than I ever expected. One contract led to another, investors poured in, and before I knew it, my name was appearing in financial magazines. I bought my first apartment, then my first house, then, finally, the mansion. The one that would change everything. But the best part? I wasn't done yet. Because soon, they would come crawling. And this time, I would be the one to decide what happened next. Success wasn't an accident. It wasn't luck. It wasn't handed to me on a silver platter like it had been for my siblings. No, I built it. Brick by brick. Sacrifice by sacrifice. While they lived their lives wasting every privilege handed to them, I was carving out a legacy from nothing. And the best part? They still didn't know. The first steps toward power. The early years were brutal. I worked myself into exhaustion, juggling jobs and college, barely surviving on ramen and determination. I didn't have connections, trust funds, or family support. I had to claw my way up, one painstaking inch at a time. But I had something stronger than wealth or status. I had hunger, and nothing was more dangerous than a starving man with a plan. At first, I worked for pennies. Late-night coding jobs, odd tech gigs, anything that put money in my pocket. I studied my professors, learning not just what they taught, but how they thought. I dissected businesses, studied patterns, identified gaps in industries others overlooked. And then I saw it, my opportunity. A small, overlooked sector in the tech industry. Everyone was too focused on flashy new apps, on social media trends, on the next viral sensation. But I saw what no one else did. Security. The internet was growing faster than regulations could keep up. Companies were vulnerable. People were careless. And hackers were getting smarter every day. If I could protect those businesses, secure their data, fortify their digital defenses, then I wouldn't just make money. I'd own an industry. The first big win. I started my cybersecurity firm in a tiny rented office, with nothing but an outdated laptop and a mind that refused to accept failure. Clients were hard to get at first. No one wanted to trust a nobody with their security. But I was relentless. I took on small contracts, worked at insane hours, made sure every project exceeded expectations. Word spread. A small business recommended me to a bigger one. That bigger business led me to an investor. And then, the dominoes fell. A corporate giant had been hit with a data breach, a multi-million-dollar disaster. Their security team had failed them, and they were desperate. I took the risk, approached them personally, and offered a solution. They laughed at first. I wasn't from Silicon Valley. I wasn't backed by some prestigious venture capitalist. I was just a kid with a sharp mind and no patience for doubt. But when I laid out my plan, their laughter died. Because I knew exactly how they had been breached. I knew exactly how to fix it. And I knew exactly how to make sure it never happened again. They took the gamble. And in that moment, everything changed. One contract turned into 5. 5 turned into 50. My business exploded overnight. And suddenly, I wasn't the nobody they had ignored. I was the name they couldn't afford to forget. The money, the power, the silence. Wealth came faster than I could process. One moment, I was skipping meals to afford rent. The next, I was signing million-dollar deals before breakfast. I bought my first luxury apartment. Not because I needed it, but because I could. Because I had spent too many nights in a basement that smelled like mildew and rejection. And yet, I still didn't tell them. My parents. My siblings. They had no idea that the child they had shoved aside was now standing at the top of an empire. I ignored every call, every weak attempt at reconnection. I wasn't ready yet. Because success wasn't enough. Not yet. I didn't just want wealth. I didn't just want freedom. I wanted them to feel it. I wanted them to experience the very thing they had made me suffer powerlessness. The house that would change everything. I could have bought any home. A penthouse in New York. A beachfront mansion in Malibu. A fortress in the mountains. But I didn't want just any house. I wanted the kind of house that made people stop and stare. The kind that made my parents' once grand mansion look like a guest house. So I built it. Every inch of my estate was crafted with purpose. The golden chandeliers weren't just lights, they were statements. The infinity pool wasn't just luxury, it was a symbol. A reminder of where I had come from. And where I was now. The guest rooms were bigger than my siblings' childhood bedrooms. The dining hall could fit 3 times the number of people who had ever sat at our family table. And at the farthest end of the house, past the marble staircases and the grand halls, there was one small, hidden door. A basement. It was perfect. The silence before the storm. I could have reached out. I could have called them, invited them over, flaunted my success. But I didn't. Because I didn't need to. I knew how life worked. People like my parents, people who only valued status, wealth, and appearances, only noticed others when they had something to gain. I didn't have to chase them. They would come to me. All I had to do was wait. And when they finally did, I would be ready. Because the next time they saw me, I wouldn't be the child in the basement anymore. I would be the man who owned the house. And this time, they would be the ones begging for a room. It happened on a quiet afternoon. The kind of day where the air was still, and the world seemed to hum with an eerie calm, as if it was bracing itself for something unexpected. I was in my office, one of many, going through contract renewals when my assistant walked in, her expression unreadable. "You have a call," she said. I almost dismissed it. Calls were nothing new. Investors, executives, government officials, they all wanted a piece of my time. But then she said the name. "It's your mother." For a second, the world went silent. My mother. The woman who had barely acknowledged me unless it was to remind me to be grateful for the scraps of attention she threw my way. The woman who let my siblings bask in warmth while I grew up in shadows. I stared at the phone on my desk. She had never called me before. Not once. And now, after all these years, she suddenly had something to say? I leaned back in my chair, watching the screen as it blinked with her name. The past was knocking, but I wasn't sure if I cared enough to answer. I let it ring. The call went to voicemail. And that should have been the end of it. But then it rang again. And again. And again. Something was wrong. Curiosity won over my indifference. I picked up. The fall of their world. "Hello." There was a pause on the other end. Then a sharp inhale, like she was struggling to find the right words. "Where are you?" Not "how are you?" Not "I've missed you." Just those two words, soaked in something that almost sounded like desperation. I didn't answer. I let her sit in the silence she had forced me to live in for years. Then she sighed. "Your father, he made some bad decisions." I resisted the urge to laugh. Some bad decisions? This was the same man who had told me I had to earn my space in the house while my siblings were given everything without question. The same man who looked through me as if I were invisible. And now he was suddenly important enough to mention? I said nothing, waiting. She continued, her voice brittle. "We're losing the house." Those words sent a strange thrill through me. The house. The same mansion where I was treated as an afterthought, a stain on their perfect world. I imagined it now, empty, lifeless, stripped of its power. Good. It was bound to happen eventually, I said, my tone casual. She hesitated, caught off guard by my indifference. We don't have anywhere to go." And there it was. The real reason for her call. They needed me. The child they had ignored. The son they had pushed into the basement like an inconvenience. Now, they were homeless. And suddenly, I was worth something. "Your father thought he could fix it," she continued, voice trembling. "But it's too late. We're drowning in debt. Clara lost her job. Marcus's, well, you know how he is." I did. Marcus had never worked for anything in his life. If he couldn't throw money at a problem, he had no idea how to solve it. They were all crumbling. And I was untouchable. The power shift. "You need a place to stay," I said flatly, already knowing the answer. She exhaled, as if relieved I had finally understood. "Yes, just for a while. Until we get back on our feet." I wanted to laugh. The irony was poetic. Years ago, when I had asked for a place, a real place, inside that mansion, they had told me I should be grateful for whatever they gave me. And now, here they were, begging me for the same thing they had denied me. I let the silence stretch between us. Then, finally, I said, "I have a house." The eagerness in her voice was immediate. "Oh, thank God. But," I interrupted, my voice turning cold, "there are conditions." She hesitated. "Conditions? You'll stay in the basement." The silence was deafening. The taste of their own medicine. "What?" She finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You heard me," I said, my tone calm, almost indifferent. "If you want a place to stay, you'll take the basement." Her breath hitched. "You can't be serious." "I'm very serious." I could almost see her face. The horror. The disbelief. The same emotions I had felt when I was shoved into the basement as a child, when I realized that in my own family's eyes, I was worth nothing. "You think this is funny?" she snapped, her voice breaking under the weight of her pride. "No," I said. "I think it's fair." A shaky breath. "Then, you can't do this to us." "Why not?" I leaned forward, gripping the edge of my desk. "You did it to me." The line was quiet. For the first time in my life, my mother had nothing to say. She had spent years believing she was untouchable, that she could treat me however she wanted, and I would always remain beneath her. Now, the power was in my hands. And she knew it. The last offer. "Take it or leave it," I said, my voice steady. "The choice is yours." She didn't respond right away. I could hear her struggling, her pride warring with her desperation. Then, Finally, a quiet, broken, "Okay." I smiled. Good. And then I hung up. No reassurances. No promises. Because now, for the first time in their lives, they were the ones with nothing. And I was the one with the power to decide their fate. I didn't rush. After that phone call, I let them stew in their misery for a few more days. I imagined them pacing the empty shell of their once grand home, surrounded by unpaid bills and eviction notices. I didn't call them back. I didn't check on them. Because for years, when I was in the basement, cold, forgotten, and ignored, they never checked on me. Now, it was their turn to feel what it was like to be invisible. And when I was ready, I finally sent the invitation. Not through a desperate phone call. Not through a weak, pleading message. I made it official. An email. A cold, formal letter with my company's logo at the top. Subject, temporary housing agreement. Dear Mr. and Mrs. ______. As per our recent conversation, I am willing to provide you with temporary housing at my estate. Your accommodations will be in the basement quarters, effective immediately upon your arrival. House rules will be outlined upon entry. Please note that this arrangement is conditional and subject to change at my discretion. You will abide by my terms, or you will find another place to stay. Sincerely, my name, CEO, my company name. I knew the moment they read it. They must have felt it. The shift. The power that had once been theirs was now mine. Their arrival. 3 days later, they showed up. I watched from the balcony as their car, a once luxurious sedan that had seen better days, pulled through the grand gates of my estate. They stepped out slowly. My father first. The man who had once towered over me, his voice a booming authority, now small in the presence of something he had no control over. My mother followed, clutching her purse as though it could protect her from reality. And my siblings? Clara looked around with wide, desperate eyes, as if she was trying to convince herself this was all a misunderstanding. Marcus, ever the entitled one, scoffed under his breath. He had always believed that wealth would never abandon him. And yet, here he was, with nothing. I didn't rush to greet them. Let them stand there. Let them feel the weight of their new reality. Finally, I descended the grand staircase at the front of the house. My steps were slow, deliberate. I wasn't that kid in the basement anymore. I was the man who owned the house. Welcome, I said simply. They looked at me like I was a stranger, because to them, I was. The tour. I let them see it all. The sprawling hallways lined with artwork worth more than their lost house. The marble floors polished to perfection. The grand chandeliers dripping in gold. Every detail was designed to remind them that I had surpassed them without them. Marcus muttered something under his breath. Clara's hands trembled as she walked past the dining hall that could fit 30 people, the kind of place she used to dream about when she still had money. And my mother? She looked at me, eyes filled with something unreadable. Regret? Shame? It didn't matter. I led them down a long corridor, away from the grandeur of the estate, toward the farthest end of the house. And then, I stopped at a door. A simple, plain wooden door that stood in stark contrast to the rest of the estate. I turned the handle, and pushed it open. The basement. It was small, cramped. A single bed, a dim overhead bulb, and a tiny window near the ceiling that barely let in any light. The air was thick with silence as they took it in. This, I said, my voice calm, is where you'll be staying. My mother flinched as though I had slapped her. You can't be serious, Marcus muttered. I stepped inside and ran a hand along the rough walls. It's livable, I said, repeating the exact words they had told me all those years ago. You should be grateful. My father's jaw clenched. This isn't funny. Do I look like I'm joking? I said, staring at him. Silence. For the first time in their lives, they had no power. No authority. Nothing. Just like I once had. And that was justice. I didn't expect them to accept it quietly. No, people like my parents, people who had lived their entire lives believing they were untouchable, didn't break that easily. And I wasn't in a hurry to teach them. I stood by the basement door, arms crossed, watching as my mother clutched the hem of her coat as though she was trying to protect herself from the cold, even though the temperature was perfectly fine. My father? He was stiff, silent, staring at the small, dimly lit space that had just become their reality. Clara had already started shaking her head, her hands gripping the handles of her expensive suitcase, a suitcase she could no longer afford to fill. And Marcus? He let out a humorless chuckle. This is a joke, right? I didn't answer, because we both knew it wasn't. I simply stood there, waiting, letting them feel the weight of my silence the way I had felt theirs for years. And then, My mother spoke. Her voice was soft, almost pleading. "Sweetheart, you can't be serious." That word, sweetheart, landed like poison on my skin. When was the last time she had called me that? Had she ever? I let the question sit in the back of my mind for a moment before shaking my head, stepping inside the basement room, my hands brushing over the old wooden dresser, the single nightstand, the plain, uncomfortable-looking bed. It was almost exactly like the basement I had grown up in. Except this time, it was theirs. "This," I said slowly, "is where you'll stay." My father's fists clenched. "We are not living in a basement." I arched a brow. "Why not?" I did. The room was suffocatingly silent. They had no argument, no justification, because deep down, they knew. I took a step toward them, my expression unreadable. For years, I asked for a real place in that house. For years, I was told to be grateful for what I was given. I was shoved into a basement while you all lived in comfort, and you expected me to accept it. You expected me to think it was enough. I let my gaze travel from my father to my mother, to Marcus, to Clara, before I continued. "But now, when it's your turn, suddenly the basement isn't good enough?" Marcus scoffed. "This is different, is it?" My voice was dangerously calm. "Explain it to me, then." He opened his mouth, then shut it again. Because he had nothing. None of them did. I watched my mother's face crumble, her expression twisting into something between shame and desperation. "We made mistakes," she whispered. "But we're your family." Ah, family. That was funny. Because when I was the one left in the basement, they never acted like my family. And now, when it was convenient, when they needed me, now we were family? I exhaled sharply and looked at them, tilting my head slightly. "Tell me something," I said. "If the roles were reversed, if I had failed, if I was the one begging for a place to stay, would you have let me live in that mansion with you?" The answer hung in the air, suffocating. None of them could meet my eyes. Because we all knew the truth. They wouldn't have let me through the front door, breaking them down. I stepped back, letting them take in the space again. "I won't throw you out," I said finally. "But these are the conditions." My father inhaled sharply through his nose, his pride clearly boiling under the surface. But he didn't speak, because he had no choice. No money, no power, no control, nothing. And I wanted him to feel it. I wanted all of them to feel it. Because this was more than just a room. This was a lesson. This was justice. I watched my mother carefully, waiting for her to fight, to scream, to demand something better. But she didn't. She simply swallowed hard and whispered, "For how long?" I shrugged. "However long I decide." And the look on her face? It was priceless. Because she knew, at that moment, she had no control. Not anymore. The first night, they didn't unpack right away. They just stood there, staring at their new reality, as if they were waiting for me to change my mind. I didn't. I simply turned on my heel and walked out, closing the door behind me. Not slamming it. Not locking it. Just closing it. Because that was worse. They weren't trapped. They could leave any time they wanted. But they wouldn't. Because they had nowhere else to go. I went back upstairs, poured myself a drink, and stood by the massive floor-to-ceiling windows in the living room, watching as the city lights blinked in the distance. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel regret. I felt calm. Because for the first time in my life, I had control. And they had nothing. Just like they had given me. The first night, they didn't come out of the basement. I didn't expect them to. They needed time to process their new reality. Time to sit in the same kind of darkness I had lived in for years. And I enjoyed the silence. I woke up early, just as I had when I was a teenager. But this time, I wasn't sneaking out of a damp basement. I was stepping into my home. A home where I dictated the rules. A home where they no longer held power over me. By noon, I knew they were still downstairs. No sounds, no footsteps, no movement. Finally, I decided to go check. I took my time descending the stairs, savoring the slow realization they must have been having. That I wasn't coming down to apologize. That I wasn't going to change my mind. I knocked once. Then, without waiting for permission, I opened the door. The cracks in their pride. The air was heavy, stale. My father sat stiffly on the small bed, his back ramrod straight, jaw clenched so tightly it looked like it might crack. My mother stood by the tiny window, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the sliver of light that barely illuminated the room. Marcus and Clara were sitting on the floor. No more arrogance in their eyes. No more sneers or scoffs. Just silence. I leaned against the doorframe. "How's the room?" No one answered. I let the silence stretch between us, just like they used to when I needed something from them. I wanted them to feel it. The helplessness. The discomfort. The realization that they were beneath me now. Finally, my mother turned. Her eyes were puffy, like she had spent the night crying. Good. How long do you plan to keep us here? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. I tilted my head slightly. I don't know. How long did you keep me in a basement? She flinched. My father finally spoke, his voice hoarse. This is childish. I smiled, slow and unbothered. Is it? His nostrils flared. You have everything now. Money. Power. A mansion. Do you really need this? Ah, there it was. The belief that success should have erased my resentment. That I should be grateful and let the past go. I stepped forward, staring him down. Tell me something, I said, my voice eerily calm. If I had failed, if I had been the one standing in front of your door, homeless, helpless, would you have let me stay in your mansion? More silence. More avoidance. Because we all knew the truth. They would have left me outside. You know the answer, I said, nodding. And that's why you're here? Their desperation. Clara, who had always been the least interested in responsibility, finally spoke. I get it, she murmured. We treated you like you didn't matter. We were awful. But we were kids, too. We didn't think. That's the problem, I interrupted. You never thought. Not about me. Not about what I felt. You were handed everything while I had nothing. And now, I gestured around the room. Now, you get to understand what that feels like. Marcus looked away, jaw tightening. Good. Let them sit in it. Let them feel it. My mother took a small step forward. We were wrong, she admitted. We should have done better. We should have treated you. Like family? I asked, cutting her off. You should have treated me like I existed? Her lips trembled. She said nothing. I took a slow breath, exhaling through my nose. I had waited years for this moment. To see them powerless. To see them breaking. But something unexpected happened. The satisfaction wasn't as sweet as I thought it would be. Not because I forgave them. Not because they didn't deserve it. But because I wasn't them. I had built myself up from nothing. I had crawled out of that darkness without their help. And now? Now, I had everything. I looked at them, at their hollow expressions, at the pieces of their pride crumbling like dust. I had one. And they knew it. The last word. I turned toward the door, gripping the handle. They tensed. Waiting. Hoping. I didn't turn back when I spoke. You can stay. In the basement. Or you can leave. A long silence. Then, finally, my father asked, where would we even go? I shrugged. Not my problem. And then, without another word, I stepped out, closing the door. Not slamming it. Not locking it. Just closing it. Because that was worse. They had no chains keeping them here. No locks trapping them inside. But they wouldn't leave. Because they had nowhere else to go. And that was the real justice.